Hello, my friends. Welcome to Star Wars Transmissions, our first Q&A, which I'm pretty freaking excited about. We got a whole slew of questions that we're going to get into that I'm very excited to answer for you guys. Before we get into our questions, though, I've been wanting to do a Q&A slash mailbag for the channel for a while. This is something I've been wanting to do probably since I started doing YouTube like 2 years ago now. And I've only recently started thinking about doing this more seriously. And I figured, why the hell not? So one of the things that I would like to know from you all is, for future mailbag videos, let me know the best way that you guys would like to share your questions with me. You want to leave questions in, let's say, a community post that I make on YouTube, and our Discord server that I actually just wound up creating recently, via email. What's going to be the easiest way for you guys to share your questions with me? Let me know in the comments or in the chat what would be the easiest way for you guys to share your questions with me. So this way, as we continue with the mailbags and Q&A videos, you guys will be able to share those questions with me. So with that said, my friends, let's freaking get into it. So our first question comes from Popcorn Junkie 82. What would you consider to be the scariest thing in the Star Wars universe? Star Wars really isn't that scary, so it took me a little bit to think of some things, but there were a couple of things that I was like, okay, yeah, if these were real, or even just in terms of the Star Wars universe, these would be the scariest things that I could probably encounter. So the first thing that I thought of was Suma Verminoth. These are these gigantic spacefaring species, essentially of legend, that dwelled particularly in the Arcades Maelstrom around the planet Kessel, as well as in the Red Honeycomb Zone, which is a pathway through the galactic barrier between the unknown regions and the rest of the galaxy. These Lovecraftian monstrosities first appeared in, most notably, Solo: A Star Wars Story. So we see them, or this one in particular, when Han and company are making the infamous Kessel Run. And I love that scene. The scene, I feel like, is just a ton of fun. Again, not really scary, right? Star Wars isn't scary, but still, these are frightening looking creatures. Could you imagine, let's say you're flying in a ship, or even let's just say in the real world, right? You're in a freaking submarine and you just see something like this underwater. Absolutely terrifying. Like, the fact that these things can live in the vacuum of space is wild and absolutely horrifying, especially because we know in the real world, there are, what are those things called? I can't remember. Those like small microscopic like bear things. I can't remember the name of them, but there are creatures, there are microscopic creatures on Earth that I believe NASA has shot into space or brought them with them into space, into the International Space Station. And those things can live in space, in the vacuum of space. So we know that there's creatures on this planet that can. So is it really that far-fetched that we could have planets throughout the universe that could live in the vacuum of space? That thought is absolutely terrifying. And yeah, Suma Verminoth are freaking horrifying creatures in the Star Wars galaxy. It's an unidentified subspecies of Suma Verminoth. So we get this monstrosity in the Greg Pak's Darth Vader comic series, which, shout out to Greg Pak in that comic series. If any of you are comic readers or are Darth Vader fans and you're not reading Greg Pak's current Darth Vader run, highly recommend it. It's been Super, super fun. One of probably my current favorite comic runs right now, Star Wars comics. Greg Pak's Darth Vader. So I think this is in issue 9 or 10. I can't remember. In that arc of Darth Vader winds up traveling to Mustafar. He meets the Eye of Webbish Bog. He winds up getting a Sith Wayfinder, and him and Ochia Bestoon are going to be traveling to Exegol. On their way to Exegol, they're passing through the Red Honeycomb Zone, and they see this freaking monstrous spacefaring beast. This issue is wild as hell because, like, right before this, Darth Vader winds up having these, like, force visions. It's almost like the dude is, like, high and tripping. He has these wild force visions. It's really, really cool. And so Ochi and Darth Vader see this Summa Verminoth, and Darth Vader essentially winds up using the Force to tame this creature and control it. And then after he tames it, he rides that thing into Exegol like an absolute boss. Because at this point in the Star Wars timeline in this comic, Sidious is super pissed with Vader. This happens not too long after the events of The Empire Strikes Back. After The Empire Strikes Back, Vader knows Luke's his son, and now he's pissed. He's angered by the fact that he has a son, and people have been concealing the birth of his son and his child and the life of his child from him. And now he wants to find out who hid Luke from him, who lied about his son to him, and he wants to go and destroy them. Sidious finds out, and Sidious is pissed. Sidious is basically saying you should not be sulking in your sorrow and your sadness. You should be using the tools of a Sith, anger and malice. And so Sidious punishes Vader. And so going back to what I mentioned before, right? Sidious like force crushes Vader and his mechanical limbs, and then dumps him on Mustafar and sicks the Sith assassin Ochi of Bestoon on Vader, and essentially says to Vader, if you're worthy of being my apprentice, you are going to have to survive this situation. And so Vader, being a badass that he is, of course, he does. And then he and Ochi of Bestoon, they wind up going to Exegol on their way, tames this freaking beast, uses the Force, rides it into Exegol to basically, he knows that Sidious is going to be there, and he wants to fight Sidious. Well, Sidious, being the badass that he is, uses the Force to basically strangle this creature with its own tentacles, and then crushes itself. Just absolutely wild. I cannot recommend the Darth Vader, Greg Pak's Darth Vader enough. This arc especially is freaking awesome. This is now in issue number 11. This image is from issue 11. Is incredible. The issue takes you into like the bowels of the Sith Citadel on Exegol, which we saw in The Rise of Skywalker. In the issue, we get like, it's implied, it's not outright stated, but it's implied that Sidious acquired Luke Skywalker's hand, and that Luke Skywalker's hand could have been used to create Snoke, which is dope, which I think is really cool. And we learn also that the beginnings, I shouldn't say the beginnings, but Sidious had been implementing the Final Order and those planet-destroying starships and building up the Sith Eternal during the events of The Empire Strikes Back, and when this comic takes place, which I think is really cool. I really like that. So yeah, totally recommend Greg Pak's Darth Vader if you haven't read it. It's a spectacular comic, and yeah, we get to see this horrifying creature. And not only do we get to see this, because before this slide, let me see if I can find it quick. Before this image, there is a scene of Sidious using the Force to control these like lobster creatures on Exegol. It sounds wackadoo, and it is, and I love it. Like, so these guys here, these two freaking like lobster creatures, Sidious is controlling them with the Force. I love you could see him like laughing, controlling them with the Force and using them to fight Vader's Suma Verminoff. And if you can see, that's Vader right there on top of that Suma Verminoff. That's how freaking big this thing is. Vader winds up using the Force to control the Suma Verminoff to defeat these lobster guys, and then that's when Sidious winds up then using the Force to force it to crush itself. But yeah, absolutely wild freaking issue. Highly recommend. If you're not a big comic reader, see if you can get Greg Pak's Darth Vader issue number 11 out from your library, or see if you can check it out somewhere online, because it's a spectacular issue. Highly, highly recommend it. So moving on. The next most horrifying thing in Star Wars, because there's not just one, we got a few things. The next most horrifying thing that I could think of in Star Wars are the knobby white ice spiders that we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian. For starters, spiders are disgusting. They're so gross. I know some people think spiders are cool. They are disgusting. So now imagine giant spiders that want to kill you and eat your remains. No fucking thank you. Want no part of that. So these creatures are absolutely terrifying. And I actually, when I got this question, I went back and watched. I think it's episode 2 or 3. I think it's 2 though, of season 2 of The Mandalorian. I went back and watched that part of the episode. Oh, it is incredible. The music as these freaking spiders are appearing, the sound editing is spectacular. Just that scene is done so well, and that's absolutely a scene I would say that teeters on like the horror genre. Probably one of the closest scenes we'll get in Star Wars, at least up to this point, that could be considered like horror. But yeah, these things are absolutely freaking disgusting and hideous and scary. And even after Din throws like one of his little like belt grenades that he like toss and they'll stick onto a wall, even after he throws one at this thing's head, it still survives and almost takes down the Razor Crest. Just and like there's one shot where a smaller knobby white spider winds up spitting spiderweb at Din, and it catches Din's hand, sticking it up to, I think it's the hull of the Razor Crest, and he's shooting these damn spiders so that the Frog Lady and Grogu could get into the cockpit of the Razor Crest. And it almost, I mean, you know, he's not going to die, but essentially he's like putting his life on the line to protect them. Just, oh, what a great scene. And yeah, these things are absolutely horrifying. And then there's like these are called Kryknas, these spiders from Star Wars Rebels. When the episode of The Mandalorian aired, I thought, oh, these are the spiders from Rebels. Well, this spider is called a knobby white spider, and these guys are called Kryknas. And the knobby white spiders, let me see if I can find. They are based off of a Steve McQuarrie image that he created of Dagobah. Really cool. So if you go to Wikipedia and you type in to the search knobby white spiders, you'll get information on there, and then you'll see the artwork from Ralph McQuarrie that these disgusting spiders are based off of. Totally recommend checking that out. But yeah, absolutely horrifying. And I'm sure there's other creatures in Star Wars that I did not think of that are just as horrifying. There are other like space faring creatures. What the heck is I can't remember the name of the creature in Empire Strikes Back that is living in that asteroid that Han and company, they fly the Millennium Falcon into its mouth and then almost get eaten by it. I can't remember that creature, but like that gigantic worm thing, that's also horrifying to think that there could be this gigantic spacefaring creatures that live in the vacuum of space. No, thank you. So yeah, if there are other creatures that I'm not thinking of that horrify you, let me know down in the comments, because I would like to know what stuff gives you nightmares in Star Wars. I want to hear about it. All right. So moving on. Don't know how to pronounce this person's name. What do you feel is needed in order to improve the quality of Disney Star Wars? I'm actually going to have a spicy take here. Generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm and how they've handled creating Star Wars content for us. Now, with that said, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't things I think should have been handled differently, or things that Lucasfilm shouldn't have done differently, or should have done differently, I should say. But overall, I think we've gotten some excellent Star Wars stories since Disney acquired Lucasfilm. And that's really, at the end of the day, what makes me happy is I want to be able to continue to read and consume and watch Star Wars stories. And I think we've gotten some really, really great Star Wars stories since Disney acquired Lucasfilm. But with that said, the biggest thing I think Lucasfilm needs to do is when creating shows, movies, comics, books, or whatever, there has to be a plan in place. Things need to be planned out. Have a plan in place, get your writers, your creators together, and formulate the plan for that story, whatever it's going to be. Again, whether it's a series of films, comics, books, shows, whatever, get that plan in place, know what you're looking to do from day one up until the release of whenever that content is being created, and then you've got an exit plan for that story, or a final point for that story, and make sure you are initiating that plan and putting that plan in place and doing everything you can to try to stay within the confines of that plan that you've created. Because the sequel trilogy is a prime example of what I would not do, or what I do not think Star Wars should be doing. It's been talked about ad nauseum on YouTube. Tons of articles have come out about it. Essentially, Lucasfilm and Disney didn't really have a plan in place for the sequel trilogy. I love The Last Jedi. I know a lot of people don't like The Last Jedi. I happen to love that film, but The Force Awakens, I'm not the biggest fan of. It's an entertaining movie, it's pretty much a copy of A New Hope. Rise of Skywalker, it has moments that are absolutely incredible, and it has moments that are absolutely terrible. And the three films together really don't feel cohesive. They do not feel like a cohesive story. Say what you want about the prequel trilogies. I love the prequels. Some people might not like them, but they tell a cohesive story from start to finish. The original trilogy tells a cohesive story from start to finish. The sequel trilogy, not so much. We get moments in the sequel trilogy that are incredible. We get moments in the sequel trilogy that land really flat. And while there are some really excellent characters that we have gotten in the sequel trilogy, some of them just kind of feel meh to me. The sequel trilogy isn't really a trilogy that I spend a ton of time with. I'll watch shows, movies, or whatever that may come out from that time period. I'll read books or comics that come out from that time period, because I'll consume any Star Wars, any and all Star Wars I'll consume. But the sequel trilogy is not going to be my go-to era for Star Wars content. So for me, that's got to be the one thing. And I think Lucasfilm has learned that. I think Lucasfilm has learned that lesson of, hey, we need to have a plan in place for when we're creating stories. At least it seems that way, because I think Lucasfilm and Disney's goal was to I think it was like 4 billion. I think their plan was to recoup that 4 billion that they spent to acquire Lucasfilm from George Lucas. So I think their plan was, hey, we got to recoup that money as quickly as possible. Let's pump out a sequel trilogy and a series of films. I think they've learned that they can't do that because there's been some serious backlash. So I do think that moving forward, Lucasfilm is going to handle things correctly and that they've learned from their mistakes with the sequel trilogy. At least I hope they will. But, you know, with that said, guys, there's been some really great moments. As I mentioned, I love The Last Jedi, and I know that movie's not for everyone, and that's okay if you don't like it, but I think there's some excellent moments in that movie. Andor has been freaking incredible, has been so good. The High Republic has been fantastic. Oh, I cannot stress enough to you all how awesome the High Republic has been. And this is someone that really likes the Old Republic. I love the Old Republic. I've spent a ton of time with the Old Republic stories, and the High Republic is great. It's so much fun. I get so excited for each new High Republic release. The High Republic comic series has been spectacular. I think the High Republic is a great example of how Lucasfilm can handle things, because that story arc has 5 architects. The main authors of the entire story of the High Republic, they sat down for a long period of time at the Lucas Ranch, whatever it's called, I can't remember, crafting the overall story arc of the High Republic from start to finish. So right now, Lucasfilm Publishing and the story arc architects, which are going to be Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Lopez, Charles Soule. I'm totally drawing a blank on the Kevin Scott, and there's one more. She wrote The Falling Star, and I'm totally drawing a blank on her name right now. But they have created basically a start and an end point for the High Republic, and I think so far that I can see that, and the High Republic has been awesome. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series is another really great series. Let's go back for a second. Same thing with the Clone Wars finale, Star Wars Rebels. There's a lot of really great content that we've gotten since Disney acquired Lucasfilm. So I'm definitely going to be someone that I'm very pro Disney acquiring Lucasfilm, and I'm overall pretty happy, but I do think that there are some ways that Lucasfilm can improve on the way they've gone about creating stories and releasing movies specifically for us. And I do think that they've learned probably a hard lesson, but I think they've learned a valuable lesson on how to put together stories for films and what kind of stories people wanna see. So on to our next question. My homeboy Rafael Diaz, he asked a series of questions, so we're gonna go through those one by one. So let's break these down one by one. So Rafael asks, what are some of your favorite franchises besides Star Wars? So aside from Star Wars, Game of Thrones is bar none my favorite franchise. I haven't read every single one of the books. The ones that I have read have been spectacular. They've all been really, really good. The Game of Thrones series itself, the show, is so freaking dope. Even if it didn't end on the highest of notes with season 8, still love that series. I've rewatched it. Oh my God, I don't even know how many times at this point. I've rewatched that series more than any other series. To me, I would say it's my favorite show, probably my all-time favorite show. It's so good. The first 4 to 5, maybe 6 seasons of that series are hands down some of the best television of all time, have some of the most incredible moments in all of television. And as I mentioned, the books that I have read have been really, really excellent. So I love Game of Thrones. It's such a dope series, and again, the books are great. House of the Dragon, dude, so dope. House of the Dragon like completely surpassed my expectations. I went into that show thinking and expecting a good series and was not let down in the slightest. It was so good from start to finish. Like, I'm so bummed that we got to wait until 2024, I believe, is when the second season is going to premiere. So yeah, I'm like all about Game of Thrones. It seems like HBO and is it Warner Brothers or Time Warner that owns HBO? Whatever the parent company is of HBO, they're going to start going like all in with Game of Thrones content. Kind of like Disney is doing with Star Wars for Disney Plus. HBO is going to be doing that with Game of Thrones content. So there's all these rumors about prequels and other spin-off shows, cartoons possibly. Like, dude, plug it into my veins. Give me all the Game of Thrones content possible. Like, I am all about it. Sign me the hell up. I love Game of Thrones. I love that universe. George R. R. Martin has created one of the most like vast, well-written, in-depth universes in literary history. It's just freaking dope, and it's great. So yeah, give me more Game of Thrones content. Batman, love Batman. Batman is what got me into comics as a little kid, was Batman. Like, I loved Batman when I was younger. I loved the Batman animated series, which I was so bummed when I saw, what's his name? Tony Conroy. I'm totally drawing a blank on his first name. It starts with a T. He just passed away. He did the voice of Batman in that series and in the Batman Arkham Knights like video games. I was really bummed when I saw that he died. I usually don't get bummed out when celebrities die, but the Batman animated series was like a big cartoon for me when I was younger. I had like the Batcave toy when I was younger, a ton of Batman toys. Like, yeah, Batman has been my jam ever since I was a little kid. I stopped reading Batman comics probably when I was like in college. So I haven't read Batman in a while, but yeah, Batman is dope. I can get down with Batman for sure. I also like Marvel. I shouldn't say I've never read Marvel comics. I've read a handful of Marvel comics, not a ton. But they were more of like, I bought a graphic novel or I took a graphic novel out from the library. Never really got into like series for Marvel, but I definitely enjoy the MCU. I'll watch each of the movies when they come out and the shows, but I'm not a diehard Marvel or MCU fan. Dune. I loved Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Like, probably one of my all-time favorite films. It's so spectacular. It's such a great movie. The acting in the movie is incredible. The freaking script is dope. The music is incredible. The costume designs, just everything about that movie is incredible. And that made me fall in love with that universe. I've been wanting to dive into Dune for a very long time, because that's another universe extremely vast. Like that, the Dune novels and some of the books that I think they're like encyclopedias, basically tell a story of like tens of thousands of years. So that universe is super, super vast. Like, that's the sort of stuff that I go apeshit for. So the Dune universe has been a universe that I've been wanting to dive into for a very long time, but I haven't, until Denis Villeneuve's movie came out and like blew me away. So after seeing that film, I was like, I gotta go and read the first Dune book, which I did, and it was freaking awesome. And now I got to read the rest of the series. So at some point I'll dive back into that series. But yeah, Dune is another one that I really, really love. I'm a big fan of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. This is another comic that I really, really enjoyed, and I can fuck with some adventures, or what is it? Is Teenage Witch? Sabrina the Teenage Witch, I think, is the name of the main comic series. Like, I've dabbled with that before. So Sabrina is another one that I mess with. But Lord of the Rings is dope. I haven't watched the Rings of Power yet. That's on the list for my wife and I to watch, for Danny Girl and I to watch at some point. We just crushed Severance, which is so spectacular. Cannot recommend that show enough. And I think the next show we're gonna start is probably gonna be the Rings of Power, especially with Andor. Concluding not this coming Friday, but next week, we're probably gonna start Lord of the Rings, the Power of the Rings, which I'm super excited for. Harry Potter's another one. It's another franchise I like. I've never read the books. I've enjoyed the movies. J.K. Rowling sucks. Not a J.K. Rowling fan at all. So she is definitely like kind of tarnished that series for me. But Harry Potter's another series that I really like, and I'll usually dabble with those films, although I haven't seen the most recent Fantastic Beasts. The middle entry of that trilogy was not very good, so I haven't watched the most recent one, but I'll probably watch it at some point. All right, on to Raphael's second question. If you were to make a Star Wars movie, what would it be about? I was so pumped when I got this question. I was like, hell yeah, these are the kind of questions that I love. Now, I should probably say this, that like we all have the Star Wars stories or the Star Wars characters in mind that we want to see in live action, comics, books, TV series, movies, whatever, right? We all have those characters and those stories that we want to see. And my answers may differ from yours, and that's totally cool. And if you disagree with that, any of my answers, that's totally cool. With that said, without a question, if I got to make a movie, 100% it would be about the Sith. Like when I was a teenager, when I was in college, I was always like, I want to be a damn Sith. I want to be a Sith. They dress so cool. They have red lightsabers. Their lightsabers are so much cooler than the Jedi. Like I loved everything about the Sith. And that's not even talking about lore stuff, which is also just dope. Just from like an aesthetics and a look standpoint, I was all about the Sith. And then after I graduated from college, I started to shift. I'm like, you know what? I'm a Jedi, man. I want to be a Jedi. I want to do good, but I want to look like a Sith. I want to dress like a badass and look awesome as hell, but still do good. But I still clamor for stories and lore and information about the Sith. That's the good stuff. That's the stuff that I get so freaking pumped about, especially when we get like some really juicy tidbits of lore, Sith lore, ancient Sith lore, or like information on Sith arcana. Just that's the stuff that I'm all about. So maybe if I got to create a film, maybe a film depicting the 100-year darkness in the dawn of the Sith Order. How cool would that be? So basically, the 100-year darkness is all about like a sect within the Jedi Order. I think in canon right now, we don't know like the specific Jedi, but I think like one Jedi kind of like broke away from the Jedi, and then there was this war, and that's the 100-year darkness, and that's the dawn of the Sith Order. Dawn of the Sith Order. How freaking cool would that be? And it doesn't have to be a movie or a TV series. Like just to get that in a comic or a book would be dope. But if we could get that in a movie, oh, dude, that would be incredible. I would be so pumped about that. Or if not the 100-year darkness, a film about the era of the Sith, which was a period during the Old Republic's decline where like the Sith, they were able to seize control of a vast amount of the known galaxy. And then that led to the Jedi-Sith War, which ultimately culminated in the Jedi Order and the remnants of the Old Republic defeating the Sith in 1032 BBY, and Darth Bane's creation of the Rule of Two. So like that sort of stuff, I would be so freaking pumped to see. That's the juicy stuff that I would love to see. We've already gotten in Legends the Darth Bane trilogy, which shows the waning days of the Sith Order pre Rule of Two, and then Darth Bane's creation of the Rule of Two. I think that's around an area where, as a fan, I would love to see it, but I think Lucasfilm would do well to actually avoid creating a story that, I don't want to say sidesteps, but kind of just makes the events of Drew Karpyshyn's Darth Bane trilogy no longer really hold any weight. Even though that trilogy is Legends, it is so amazing. That trilogy is incredible, and I cannot recommend it enough. But that's a trilogy that I don't want Lucasfilm to redo or to put into live action or a show or whatever. I'd rather, hey, we're going to do a Darth Bane film or movie that maybe talks about some of the events talked about in Drew Karpyshyn's trilogy, because there's a lot of years in between those books that they could explore. That would be cool. I'd be definitely down for that. I would also love to dive into Darth Plagueis. Like, Plagueis is another character that I really, really like. The Plagueis novel by, God, why am I drawing a blank? James Lucero. James Lucero, I believe, is the author's name, and my apologies if that's not correct. I'm pretty sure it's James Lucero. That book is amazing, but that's another book that I love so much, and I don't want Lucasfilm to just kind of like rehash that story or just make the events of that story completely null and void. So, you know, we could learn about some other Darth Plagueis moments or some other bits of his life. I do think we're going to see Darth Plagueis in The Acolyte, because The Acolyte is all about the Sith's buildup during the waning years of the High Republic, leading up to their demise with Darth Sidious. So I do think we're going to see Plagueis in The Acolyte. At least I hope so. So I think that that's going to be super dope. When the announcement was made with all those shows and all those movies and stories that were coming out from Lucasfilm, the show that I immediately was like, bro, I'm all about those other shows, but hands down, The Acolyte is 100% the show I'm the most excited about, because I love learning about the Sith. I love seeing the Sith. And knowing that at that point, we didn't really know what The Acolyte was going to be about, but you could tell with that name, it's going to be about the Sith. Like, sign me up. I was all for it. So yeah, 100%. If I got to make my own Star Wars film, it would without a doubt be about the Sith, because that is just the kind of stories that I love to see in Star Wars and I love to consume. All right, so next question, our boy Raphael asks, which era of Star Wars is your favorite? This is another cool question. I kind of I've answered this one a little bit to some extent. So as someone that grew up with the prequels, I'll forever love that era. I love the original trilogy, but bro, I'm like so burnt out by the Skywalker saga. And especially the Galactic Civil War. I shouldn't say burnt out. That's not the right way to say it. But again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, the Galactic Civil War is not going to be the time period that if I'm like, I feel like watching something Star Wars, I'm probably not going to pick a story that's specifically set during the Galactic Civil War. Now, with that said, Andor is kind of changing the script for me, because Andor has been incredible. But if I had to pick between the three eras of the Skywalker saga, prequel is probably going to be my pick. With that said, High Republic has been incredible so far, and I'm dying for more comics and books that dive into that time period of galactic history. Can't wait for us to start getting movies and shows that depict that era. I was just reading something today. Was it Collider? the CBN. Can't remember which outlet it was, but basically it was saying in the art of the High Republic, which I have on my Christmas wish list, Danny Grill, if you're listening to this, the Art of the High Republic book. Apparently, there's a quote in there from Kathleen Kennedy that mentions that, you know, there's the possibility that we could essentially see the High Republic play out in film or in a TV show, which I'm like ecstatic about. My assumption was if the High Republic did well, that Lucasfilm would be stupid not to create movies and shows about the High Republic. I think the High Republic, especially for a cartoon, could be a great opportunity to dip their toes in that water with like a cartoon series, an animated series. Video games would be dope. I'll take anything, to be honest with you, High Republic related. Like whenever we get a new book, even the middle grade books, I read them. I don't read every single young adult or middle grade Star Wars canon novel. I try to read every single canon release that I can, but typically for like middle grade non-High Republic stories, I usually don't read those because they're made for younger kids. High Republic stuff, 100%. I read every single High Republic story that comes out. Middle grade, young adult, the adult novels, all the comics. I'll read everything from the High Republic because it's so much freaking fun. So right now, that era is definitely my favorite period of Star Wars, which, oh my God, I'm like going on and on. I have all these images I wanted to show you guys. And of course, I'm just like talking my ass off. So this is from a book that I got. It's like a little kid's book with like stickers and stuff. And I thought this image was super cool. The High Republic is just so dope. But I also love the Old Republic. I am absolutely an Old Republic head. KOTOR 1 and 2 are dope. I played Star Wars, the Old Republic for like 5 or 7 years. That was like pretty much the game I exclusively played. And I loved that game. I recently just re-downloaded it on my computer and was like, do I want to get back into playing SWTOR? So I might start replaying that game and do some streams of playing that game. So yeah, I love the Old Republic. My only gripe with the Old Republic has always been that, bro, it's supposed to take place like 1,000 years, and depending upon what era you are in the Old Republic, it could be like 2,000 years, 3,000 years prior to the events of the Phantom Menace, but the technology is essentially the same. Like, okay, maybe they don't use Bacta, they use Kolto, but it's basically the same stuff. That's one of the things I love about the High Republic. They definitely make it so that the technology doesn't feel as advanced as it does during the prequel era, during the Galactic Civil War, which I love that, because that was always my biggest gripe with the Old Republic is, hey, as cool as this stuff is, there's really no difference between the technology, for the most part, the technology in the High Republic era versus, you know, the prequels and the original trilogy. But yeah, Old Republic is so dope. There was a series of novels that were released for Star Wars, the Old Republic video game. Can't recommend those novels enough. There's one novel specifically about Revan that is a ton of fun. If you're a Revan fan and you want more stories about Revan and you have not read that Revan novel, highly recommend it. It's a ton of fun, and I think it caps off Revan's story in a really cool way, and then Revan's story expands even more in the Old Republic, which is dope. I don't remember some of the other titles from that series, but yeah, they did like all these companion novels for the Star Wars: The Old Republic video game. They're a lot of fun. So yeah, if you're an Old Republic fan, would highly recommend those novels. They're really cool. So yeah, I'm gonna say at this point, I'm gonna be lame and say that my pick for eras, my favorite are going to be the High Republic and the Old Republic. I want Lucasfilm to get away from the Skywalker saga in that period. As I mentioned, you know, Andor is kind of changing my opinion about that because it's been so good, and it's a Star Wars story that I didn't know I wanted, and it's been spectacular. But I'd prefer if we get away from the Skywalker saga, start talking about new characters that, you know, people don't have a ton of time with, and start showing me some Jedi and some Sith from the High Republic and the Old Republic that we don't know much about, because that would be a ton of fun. So on to our last question. Raphael asks, what's your favorite Star Wars game and comic? It's another super fun question. Without even hesitation, didn't even think about it for a second. My favorite Star Wars game, bar none, is Fallen Order. Fallen Order, everything about that game is incredible. The characters, the story, the music, the visuals, it's all exceptionally well done. It's all spectacular. Can't recommend that game enough. It is so much fun from start to finish. I'm actually, I just started 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, streaming my second time. I can't believe I've only played it twice. I've like played it in bits and pieces. So after I beat it for the first time, I would go and play like, oh, I'm going to play like the first maybe 15-20 minutes of the game and see how I feel. And if I want to keep going, I'll keep going. And then I would stop. I would go and like do certain parts of the story and then stop. But now I'm streaming. It's going to be my second time doing a full walkthrough through that game and playing it again. It's just such a good game. The story is so good. Second Sister is, without question, has become one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. Not only does she have such an awesome costume, which I have definitely spent probably too much time looking at like Second Sister cosplays. If you haven't, totally check that out, because some people have created incredible Second Sister cosplays. Her outfit is incredible. Her story in Fallen Order, I don't want to give anything away if you have not played Fallen Order, or even if you haven't watched the cutscenes from Fallen Order. If you have no intention of playing the game, dude, you should watch the cutscenes. Just Google, or excuse me, go to YouTube and type in Fallen Order cutscenes, full story or whatever, and just watch the cutscenes. The story is incredible, and Fallen Sister's story in the game is so spectacular and just really, really well done. And yeah, that's another character, although it kind of remember, it takes place in 14 BBY, so the Galactic Civil War hasn't happened yet, but that's another era where I'm like, oh, I keep saying let's get away from the Skywalker saga, but that's another era where I'm like, I didn't think I would want to spend a ton of time in that time period, but man, Fallen Order, like, I cannot wait for the sequel that's going to come out. What is it, Jedi Survivor? I think it's coming out in 2023. Like, oh my God, the day that that game drops, I will be playing that game for hours that day. Cannot freaking wait. So yeah, Fallen Order, without question, is going to be my favorite Star Wars game. And then my favorite Star Wars comic is 100% going to be, yeah, there we go. Charles Soule's Darth Vader. Sometimes you'll see it as Darth Lord of the Sith. Sometimes you'll see it as Darth Vader 2017. Charles Soule's Darth Vader is freaking incredible. It is so good. We learn about the Inquisitorius. We learn about Darth Vader's basically like his moments right after Revenge of the Sith. So you start to see moments of Darth Vader's time becoming Vader right after Revenge of the Sith ends. We see the starting point of the Inquisitorius. So like, this is, I can't remember what issue this is in, but yeah, we see the Inquisitors training, and you get to learn about the inner workings of the Inquisitorius, which is just so freaking dope. We get to see some really cool ancient Star Wars lore, which is dope. Large that bad boy. This is, I don't want to give it away. If you haven't read this comic, I don't want to give it away. But yeah, we get to learn some ancient Sith lore, which is so cool. Again, going back to what I mentioned before, like I'm all about the Sith and Sith lore and ancient Sith. So learning about this specific ancient Sith was incredible. We also get to see Vader's castle being built. We get to see him bleed a kyber crystal. It is incredible. And the final issue of the comic series is like exhilarating and heartbreaking and just spectacular. And it cemented for me Charles Soule as one of my favorite writers for Star Wars. He's been an incredible writer in Star Wars, and his stories have been spectacular. And so yeah, this is going to be like, if someone asks me, hey, I've never read Star Wars before, Star Wars comics, where should I start? Without question, I would point you to Charles Soule's Darth Vader, because it's from start to finish freaking spectacular. So that's everything I got for you guys. Dude, that was a ton of fun. I'm like super excited that I finally buckled down and did a Q&A. I hope you guys like this. Let me know down in the comments how you enjoyed this. I'm going to be, this is the first Q&A that I'm doing. So as we go along, I'm sure I'm going to adjust some things or do things maybe slightly different. Maybe we'll wind up doing it the exact same way. But I want to know your thoughts, your input. How did you like this? Did you like how we did this? Do you like doing Q&As with me? Also, let me know how you'd prefer to share your questions. I probably should get the Star Wars transmission, like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, active again. I do have those for the channel, but I don't really use them. So TikTok and YouTube are like my thing. So I'll be posting community posts asking for questions, mailbag questions, Q&A questions, but we do have a Discord server. I'll make sure to put in the notes of the video, I'll make sure to put the Discord server's link. So if you want to join our Discord, our Star Wars Transmission Discord, feel free to join, and you could always ask questions in there, and I could take those questions and put them into a future Q&A video that we do. So yeah, this was a ton of fun, guys. Thanks for spending time with me. Thanks for sending me questions. Thanks for listening to me blather on about Star Wars. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions. We release videos pretty much daily at this point, and that's only going to continue. We're going to be doing Andor breakdowns for the remainder of the season. I'm not sure. Danny Girl and I were just talking about what we're going to do. For those of you that are American listeners, next week is Thanksgiving, and Andor is dropping right the Wednesday before. So Danny and I have family coming to town. We're not 100% sure what we're going to do for that, but we will absolutely be doing a live stream for this Wednesday's episode. As I mentioned, I'm doing live streams of my Fallen Order walkthrough, so keep a lookout for that. And I always love hearing from you guys, so let me know down in the comments. Was there anything that you agreed with, any of my answers that you agreed with? Was there anything that you disagreed with? Was there anything that you would like me to talk about more in future videos? Let me know down in the comments. As I mentioned, it's always dope to hear from you all. I try to respond to comments as often as I can, but it can be tricky with how busy I am. But yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Like I said, like, subscribe, follow Star Wars Transmissions on TikTok if you haven't. Andor console story game. Yuan Quan Planet Queens. I don't know what you mean by Andor console story game. Do you mean like you would like an Andor video game? Because if that's what you're asking, bro, I would be all for that. That would be so dope. Especially if we got like a game that talked about maybe if there's going to be a little bit of a time lapse in between seasons. So like, let's say season 1, which takes place in 5 BBY, season 2 takes place in 4 BBY. Maybe if there's some 6 months to a year that we don't get to see in between those 2 seasons, bro, let's get a video game or a comic or a book that dives into that time period. I'd be all about that. That'd be super cool. I am all for, even though I'm saying here like, oh, I want Lucasfilm to get away from the Skywalker saga. Star Wars is like coffee to me. Any coffee is better than no coffee. That's my viewpoint on Star Wars. Any Star Wars is better than no Star Wars. So I would be all about an Andor video game. That would be so dope. Especially if like you're doing missions that take you into like the seedy underground of Coruscant, and like you're doing stuff with shady characters or maybe criminals and gangsters. That'd be dope. So yeah, totally. I would totally be down for that. So it's a good spot to end it, guys. I'm starting to get a little hungry, so I haven't eaten yet. So we're gonna end it there, so I can go and stuff my face with some food. But thank you so much for joining in, for your questions. I hope this is the first of many Q&As that we do. With that said, my friends, may the Force be with you. And stay nerdy.